Hello, my dear folks. Welcome to the East West Show. Jack Xiao is on the show with lots of pride for many, many years with G&E TV. Yes, lately we're talking about something very big going on because somebody as big as FBI Director, Mr. James Comey, got just fired. Well, it's a big news all across the nation. It's a surprise to everybody, even to Mr. Comey himself. All right. Now, well, I'm just doing the same thing in the same way. I hope my big friend James Lee will not get mad with me. So you call me all the time, but we have problems all the time. Okay? Excuse me for that. Now, with that as introduction, Mr. James Lee, former presidential advisory board member for George W. Bush and H.W. Bush, 41 and 43, and later spokesman for former California Governor Pete Wilson, and now CEO and founder of Lee Strategy Political Consultation Group. So, sir, you have more hats than I could finish.
No, it's always good to be here, Jack.
Okay, welcome to the show. All right. We are very, very, very super confused at this time. First, we hear about Michael Flynn, and then we hear about this dismissal. And there are two cases. All sound major cases. So people kind of can't tell which is which.
Right.
How are they related? So the overall picture, what's happening, please?
Let's start first with James Comey's firing the FBI director. It's a rare occurrence for an FBI director to be fired. The last one was back in 1993. But it's not unheard of. The difficulty here is not so much that James Comey was fired, because if frankly if President Trump had fired James Comey the day after the inaugural, I don't think anybody would have thought twice about it, because both Democrats and Republicans felt, that he had botched a whole series of issues during the presidential race. But the fact that he didn't fire him after the inaugural and that he waited to this point and fired him, the optics and the timing were so bad that the only conclusion that a lot of people can make is that he was fired over the Russia investigation. So, the other problem too is self-inflicted. The White House did a very poor job of rolling this thing out. I mean, basically, the sources tell me that the decision to fire Comey was held very closely within the presidential advisory circle, and that when they actually made the decision to fire James Comey, the White House press office was actually at an ice cream social for veterans.
Yeah.
They weren't even in the office when the announcement came down.
Well, he was caught in press surprise.
Yeah. So I think that the rollout of this, similar to the first travel ban announcement, was pretty botched. It wasn't very good, and that created a lot of confusion for a lot of people. And the White House wasn't able to really mobilize until almost a full day later with its own circus to try to explain the president's decision. I know that within the White House itself, among President Trump, there's a certain amount of surprise at the reaction, because in their mind, they thought they were doing what Democrats had long asked for since the whole Hillary Clinton issue. The difficulty is, though, the president kind of handed over to his opponents on a silver platter an argument that he's trying to interfere with the Russian investigation, and that this is a sneaky kind of thing to go ahead and create more chaos in law enforcement. So that's the one issue. Now, you raised the Michael Flynn issue. The Michael Flynn issue is congruent to the investigation in Russia. What that investigation started with was the hacking of the DNC and the hacking of Hillary Clinton's emails by outside hackers, which we believe were affiliated or are operating in Russia. Now, how Michael Flynn fits into all of this is that during the transition, while American intelligence agencies and law enforcement were monitoring Russian communications, Michael Flynn's name came up in conversation, as well as President Trump. And there's some discussion, debate as to whether or not there are actual taped conversations of Michael Flynn taped while talking to these Russian officials, such as the Russian ambassador to the United States. So that's all speculation. We have varying degrees of people who have said, I've heard this, or I haven't heard this, or I've talked about this. So that investigation is kind of progressing along, and FBI Director Comey was the person in charge of that investigation. That's why his firing at this time really is a bad optic for the president, and the timing is incredibly bad to make this decision, even though he probably had a lot of legitimacy to go ahead and fire Comey based on how that information was being handled with the Hillary Clinton emails last year. I mean, Democrats universally were calling for his firing last year. So a lot of what the president does is unfortunately self-inflicted, which from a communication standpoint is avoidable. But this president seems to not have an attachment for doing what appears to be the best thing for him. And so he just wades into the chaos and creates it.
In other words, if I follow you right, sir, it sounds like an operational error rather than political scandal or something.
Well, here's the problem. The American people are left with basically three assumptions about the Comey firing. One, we could take the president at his word that he did it based on a long-standing belief that James Comey was doing a poor job, and which is fine. We take him at his word for that, and he certainly has the right as president to fire the FBI director. Two, that he fired the FBI director because the investigation to Russia was going to harm the president, so that's why he did it.
Okay.
Or three, that the White House staff was simply incompetent in how they rolled this stuff out. Any one of those three are not good for the president because it wasn't done in a really effective and tactical manner that allows him to kind of win on the issue. And that's part of the difficulty he's had, whether or not it's the travel ban, building the wall, the first Obamacare defeat on his legislation, the tax reform proposal that's going out. The president has struggled to get his message across. And you know, for those of us on the outside looking in who work in the communications business, we kind of shake our heads and we say that, you know, a lot of this stuff doesn't have to happen this way. I mean, the president can't do a better job.
Was there or could there be speculation number 4 that Mr. Comey stopped the further prosecution for Hillary Clinton, and then for that, well, he deserves to be fired. Well, as president has the right to do so.
Here's the other problem that the White House has had. They've changed their story as to the reasons why Comey was fired almost 3 times in 2 days. So that adds to the confusion on the narrative. I mean, the interview the president gave to NBC News and Lester Holt, he said one thing in terms of the fact that James Comey was incompetent. In the earlier press briefing from the White House with the Deputy White House Press Secretary, the argument was that the DOJ and the FBI staff had lost confidence in Director Comey. That gets refuted almost the very same day by the Deputy Director of the FBI who testifies on Capitol Hill in committee about the Russia investigation, claiming that the FBI rank and file basically adored and stayed with the director. And then you have stories within the FBI of agents who are devastated, who are crying in the hallways. All of these things add up to a very confused picture as to who's telling the truth. The difficulty is that the president has so eroded his trust bank, so to speak, in terms of the believability of his statements, that when he goes out and says something, even if it really is what he believes, people are so doubtful that he doesn't get a lot of traction on those claims. And that's part of the problem.
And next thing, lots of, for the past 2 days, I'm more asked by friends around me saying that that was a political issue, that was a partisan issue. So, to your take, sir, was that a political issue or partisan issue?
Well, you know, it really kind of depends on what side of the political fence you sit on. If you're a Democrat, you clearly believe this is a political act by the president to stop the investigation into Russia and into his administration. If you're a Republican, you chalk it up to an unfortunate lack of coordination in communicating your decision, but the president has the right to go ahead and relieve the FBI director. A lot of this is going to really depend on 2 things. One, who does he nominate to replace Comey? And 2, what is the eventual outcome of the investigation in Russia? Not just by the FBI and the DOJ, but also by the Senate and House committees that are investigating this issue still. And that really is kind of like the lingering thing. And in a lot of ways, this Russia investigation for President Trump is a death by 1,000 cuts, in the same way that in President Clinton's case, the Whitewater investigation was a death by 1,000 cuts. Or in President Obama's case, the Benghazi situation is a death by 1,000 cuts. the problem with any president is that when investigations lag on and then there are new revelations that trickle in and alter the trajectory of that and give new life to the news story, they can't control it. And so, that's why Democrats may think that he's doing this for political gain. And that's, for them, a very legitimate reason why they're asking for an independent prosecutor.
And sir, lots of people asking me, because I do the news all the time. They took me as somebody who knows, and I tell them, I keep telling them, I know nothing about it. All I had is a question to ask,
Sure.
right?
Well, ultimately, look, the only person who knows what Donald Trump thinks is Donald Trump.
He's Donald
and
Trump.
Unfortunately, he doesn't quite tell us exactly what's going on there.
Okay.
And that's part of the problem.
And they all ask me this. So, I mean, the second most asked question, more frequently asked question, was that, is this action, the dismissal action, more beneficial, in more favor to Democrat or more favor to Republican? Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll give them some kind of thorough analysis, please. And those folks who ask me the question, including you send emails about, so probably you get the answer, please, with James Lee, my good friend, Honorable James Lee, from the federal, from the state level, and he knows politics of all levels. Stay with us, your trustee. Hello, dear folks. Welcome back to the discussion about our President Donald Trump, who has just fired the director of FBI, Mr. James Comey. Well, it's a big position, a big guy, 6 foot, 5 or 6.
He's a tall man.
Yeah, he's a tall man, big guy, and plus he has lots of resources under him and behind him, and that's another subject when we come back to talk about. But right now, get to the point. Lots of people asking me, lots of friends asking me about this as being a political issue, partisan issue. If it is a partisan issue, who benefits more, right? So I'm checking with my friend, Honorable James Lee, former presidential advisor for President George H.W. Bush, and W. Bush 41 and 43, and spokesman for our California former Governor Pete Wilson. Now he's founder and CEO for Elite Strategy and political consultation firm. Big chunk. All right. So, question, all right? So you heard the question, right? So who gets more benefited? So, I mean, in favor of Democrats or in favor of Republicans more?
Well, I mean, from a political vantage standpoint, I don't think there's any argument that the president has handed the Democrats, a golden opportunity to attack him by the timing of this decision. If he had done this right after the inaugural, like I said before, I mean, this wouldn't really be an issue. It'd be buried and we'd be moving on to the next topic. The problem the president has at this particular moment in time is that he's trying to fight a battle where, he's making his allies have to constantly apologize for him. And that's a very, very bad position to put people that you have to rely on for legislation like members of Congress and so forth. I think that, whether or not people agree or disagree with the decision, everyone pretty much agrees that the president has, again, shot himself in the foot and given the Democrats an opportunity to, to try to put a stake in this administration.
All right. And has there been actually, to be honest, an investigation going on?
Well, there's several investigations
being conducted by the FBI towards the finding of connection between Donald Trump and Russia.
Yeah, I mean, we know of several investigations. The investigation is not specifically about a connection, trying to find a connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. The whole source of all this starts with the Russian hacking, and the Russian hacking from that flows outward into other areas. Now, how Donald Trump and the Trump campaign got caught up in all this was the fact that there were allegations that the Russians had conversations either with or about the Trump campaign. So we unfortunately don't have access to that information. It's not been privy to us. We haven't had any kind of disclosure, so we're kind of operating in the dark there.
In other words, on the surface, the email issue and the Russian issue are different issues, but in the core, that might be connected.
Well, I mean,
might be related to each
I
other.
mean, again, we're speculating about things that haven't been disclosed. What we do know is that the Senate and the House Intelligence Committees are both running investigations of their own, that the FBI is the lead agency on this, and that the Department of Justice oversees that investigation. So within the context of this, the only thing that we do know is that Hillary Clinton's emails were hacked. Members of the Democratic National Committee were hacked. Those emails were allegedly manipulated and disclosed by quote-unquote Russian hackers or Russian-affiliated hackers for the purpose of influencing the outcome of the American election. So that's one issue, and that's a serious issue.
That goes in favor to Donald Trump's win victory.
Well, I mean, you could make the argument as to whether or not those disclosures from her email contributed to Donald Trump's win. Frankly, I don't want to get into that game because, there's no real good answer for that. Because how James Comey handled that investigation is also a legitimate reason why Hillary Clinton may have lost that race. The fact that he made the stop of the investigation, clearing her, and then restarted the investigation only a few weeks out from Election Day, where he said there were more emails that were found on Huma Abedin's computer for her husband, Anthony Weiner.
Yeah.
And in that case, that was a separate investigation just into Anthony Weiner over allegations he was having conversations with underage minors. So you can tell how messy this whole thing gets because of all the different connections. But for the American people, I think the only thing that really does matter is the central question at hand here, and that central question is, was there any contact between Russian authorities with members of the Trump administration or the campaign committee? And in those conversations, if there were any, what was discussed? And I think that's really the only legitimate issue, which is why the case of Michael Flynn is so interesting for a lot of people, because he's the only member affiliated with the Trump campaign or the Trump administration who allegedly had any kind of face-to-face discussions with Russian authorities.
Yes.
So he's really the guy that everyone's kind of focused in on.
And of course, the other perspective is that suppose if there had never been such a thing, the email thing issue, the connection issue, Michael Flynn issue, would Donald Trump win?
That's anybody's guess. If you're a political consultant, you can make the argument that Hillary Clinton was handicapped because she was a bad candidate and she ran a horrible campaign. She raised over $1 billion and pretty much flushed it down the toilet in terms of the ability to affect the outcome. She lost in states that were traditionally Democratic, but when you look at the polling, those voters such as Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois, Indiana, that were reliably Democratic, the primary reason why they switched was economic. Jobs, lack of jobs, and so forth. Same thing in West Virginia and places like that. So did the issue of the Hillary Clinton emails and allegations of Russian hacking affect those voters? A lot of people who are far more intelligent than me would say no. So you have to kind of question, to what extent all that stuff, had an impact. I mean, voters who had a negative impression about Hillary Clinton only had that impression, reinforced. If you had a favorable impression of Hillary Clinton, it's highly doubtful that this changed your mind about it. So the folks in the middle who were ambivalent about Hillary Clinton, could you argue that this kind of pushed them into the negative column? It's possible. Is it enough to go ahead and affect the change of the election? It's doubtful when you look at the margins that she lost by in these different states. I mean, in West Virginia, she lost by almost 68 points. So, I don't know if having that argument over and over again is going to really fulfill anything in American politics, because we don't know the answer.
Yeah. And it is not people want to flip over, see the previous page, though. It is a fact, really a fact. They want to how severe if there's a damage. The damage is going to cause.
And here's the thing. This is where I kind of depart from some of my Democratic friends on the other side of the aisle. It's that, if you truly are concerned about Russian manipulation into the election, then the issue is not Donald Trump. The issue is Russia's access to our cyber systems and how weak our cybersecurity is. But we're not having that discussion in America. We're having this obsessive discussion about Donald Trump. Now, it's a legitimate issue. But if you're really concerned about Russia, then you have to deal with the Russian threat in terms of cybersecurity. And that, unfortunately, has become caught up in this partisan political discussion where it's not getting the scrutiny that it deserves.
All right. Thank you for the analysis. It not only helps us understanding the current issues, especially when they tie it all together, but also go to the fact, even prior to right after about inauguration period of time, with the Michael Flynn, with the hacking, stuff like that, or misconducting the emails, so on and so forth. And that could give you guys quite enough input about your questions. So let's take a very short moment now. A bunch of folks wrote to me saying that could be at the stretch of your attention, because President Donald Trump obviously filled with his wall thing, and now getting lots of questions asking about his Trump care, national care, or whatever care, and he's kind of distracting your attention by creating such a big event or big attention. We'll give some comment when we come back, please. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll be right back. Hello, my dear folks. Today we're talking about President Donald Trump, who has just fired the director of FBI, Mr. James Comey. Mr. James Comey, well, handsome guy and powerful guy. Lots of people know that. And there's lots of voices going from different angles talking about this dismissal. And with me today is my good friend, Mr. Honorable James Lin, of former President George H.W. Bush, both of 41 and 42, the Bush family. You're very close to them, right? And also the former spokesman for California, Governor Pete Wilson. So welcome once again back to the show. We do need absolutely your highlight on this issue. Lots of folks say to me, or even write to me, say, hey, you know what? He should have fired this guy, Mr. Comey, long time ago. Why not? And that's a bullet, and only used at a necessary time. Now, when he fumbles with healthcare issue, with his wall issue, with the immigration issue, and executive order issue, though, and then he wants to distract your attention, the public attention. Was that some kind of speculation? Tends to be right.
Well, I mean, first of all, let me just say that I want to say one word about James Comey. James Comey has a distinguished career in law enforcement. He's a tremendously decent, honorable, dignified man, and he's a man who's dedicated his life to the service of America and protecting American citizens. Unfortunately, his political instincts aren't very good, which normally in the case of the FBI director, you don't need him because you shouldn't be caught up in politics.
You're right.
But unfortunately, he was kind of thrust in situations that he wasn't really prepared for and didn't have the benefit of political counsel to help navigate him through that. So he made some mistakes. There's no doubt about that both Democrats and Republicans, took him to task for. So from that sense, the president firing him, just on those grounds alone is perfectly justified. Again, the timing of the optics of when the firing comes through. Now, to your question as to whether or not the firing is designed to cover up, his failures or lack of progress on other issues like building the wall and so forth, I would offer that the president has so many image problems right now that this is probably way down the pyramid.
He doesn't even care.
Well, I'm sure he cares, but I think that for some bizarre reason, this White House has a complete inability to get in front of issues. They're always having to play catch up. Now, in the timing of this decision to fire the FBI director, maybe it is their attempt to get ahead by setting the agenda. But even in this particular case, if that was their purpose, they failed miserably at it. So I'm not quite sure if, frankly, we've seen evidence that the White House is frankly that is operating at that kind of a high strategic level, communications-wise, to kind of move all these chess pieces to kind of create, the kind of confusion over here, so you don't see what's going on over here. The fact of the matter is that this White House, a lot of their initiatives, they've succeeded on things where they can do it on their own, like executive orders. They have really stumbled badly when it comes to trying to push things through Congress. And I think it's largely a reflection of President Trump's, background. He's a corporate CEO. He's a man who's used to doing things just by pointing a finger and saying, make it happen. And unfortunately, you can't do that with Congress with over 435
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, and he's discovered, I'm sure very uncomfortably sometimes, that politicians don't respond when you tell them what to do.
I certainly appreciate your honesty, because your analysis about the fact that he's been always catching up to, like, say, firefighters, when there's a problem, trying to kind of cover it up or just come over with it. Or instead of doing that, he's now probably trying to lead the public opinions by creating something of his own, of the administration's own. Let the public opinions follow. That could be, like you're a man of the strategy study, right? Could be a strategy, could be, but where is leading? Is leading into more confusion, is leading into more his image damage. That is the thing. My next question, and also asked by my viewers, saying that FBI, the nature, by definition of nature, is FBI a organization or a gear or department of this machine that we call a country, that belongs to the government, belongs to the independent concept, rather than a tool of the president?
Well, I mean, the FBI historically has defended its independence fiercely. I mean, if you go back to the very early history of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover was famous in being able to pretty much do whatever he wanted, to the point of where, presidents weren't able to do anything about him. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover's one of the primary reasons why the position of the director was changed.
You mean former president, right?
J. Edgar Hoover was the former director of the FBI and was the founder of the FBI.
I see.
But he's one of the reasons why the FBI director became a single 10-year appointment, because he was so independent that he built the FBI into literally an independent form of government within the United States government. So there's been an effort to try to bring more accountability into the FBI, but all presidents have scrupulously sought to protect the FBI's independence, because if you were to compromise that politically, you'd lose all your effectiveness on all the investigations that go on. So I think everyone really understands that. And I think there's an argument to be made that President Trump even understands that. But in President Trump's mind, he thought that he was doing the country a favor by firing James Comey because of these missteps and problems that he had earlier. But obviously, again, it all comes down to the timing.
In other words, it's just safe to say that the FBI is supposed to be independent, yet looking to past history, all the presidencies try to make it work for him.
Well, I think all presidents, if there's an investigation the FBI is conducting that involves members of the administration, any president would want to hope that it came out in their favor. I'm sure, in Richard Nixon's case, he was hoping that
I was just about to say that
was going to do something positive for him on Watergate. But the fact of the matter is that the FBI has a very long history of not paying attention to politics. Sometimes it gets them into trouble because they don't pay attention to politics. That they focus on the task at hand, which is running down their case and coming to a conclusion, which they can hand over to the Justice Department. The Justice Department is the more political body, and that's the one with the Attorney General that has to make the call about a lot of these issues.
If the FBI now can't get away from the control of President Donald Trump, and how would be the fact that FBI back then, during Watergate investigation, got away from it and still found out it got Nixon walked away?
Well, I think, again, you have to remember that the FBI is a law enforcement agency. It investigates. It does not prosecute. That decision is made up to the attorneys in the U.S. Justice Department.
I see.
So the FBI's, mandate is to go out there and build cases. And the decision of whether or not to prosecute is not theirs. Now, in the Hillary Clinton case, it was unusual that James Comey was given the decision to prosecute because of the issue of Loretta Lynch meeting Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, former President Clinton, on an airplane on a tarmac, in a very bizarre episode, and arguments of collusion and tampering. So, James Comey was put in a very uncomfortable position, I'm sure, for him to have to make a call about whether or not to prosecute. And I think that lends part of one of the reasons why Republicans were so upset, because they felt that he should have prosecuted, considering his press conference where he outlined literally the case against Hillary Clinton, but then eventually said, no, we're going to give her a pass.
That just reminded me. Are you saying that the time when he declared not to press charges or further prosecute, he was kind of overlapping his job to cover DOJ?
Well, you have to remember that in that particular case, Loretta Lynch stepped aside from that decision because of charges that she had been tampered in terms of the decision-making process by meeting with President Clinton. So once Loretta Lynch took herself out of that decision-making process, she turned that authority over to James Comey. The difficulty is that...
Oh my God, perfect storm. Perfect storm.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird situation, because normally you would have had the Attorney General step aside, and the Deputy Attorney General would then take over the investigation and make that decision. But because she turned it over to James Comey, she literally kind of, unfortunately, put the egg in his basket, and it probably was not a good choice, because his job in law enforcement is to build the case. His job is not to make the call as to whether or not to seek a prosecution. And that was a decision that was roundly criticized by both Democrats and Republicans, but for different reasons.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your analysis. It's very thorough. And but I believe my audience is my friends who wrote to me got the answer, and you chatted with me last night, and I believe you got the answer. Thank you very much, sir, for the answers. Let's take a very, very, very short moment now. When we come back, by the way, we have more questions than time will allow, all right? Okay. We'll be jumping right away onto the system, into the future of his presidency, also of our democracy, the system that we love so much for. So stay with us, please. Hello, dear folks. Welcome back to the discussion. As a matter of fact, we have Honorable James Lee shedding lights on the issue of the dismissal of Director of FBI James Comey. It's kind of like a long story to tell. The deeper we go, the longer we find a story goes. It stretches all antedates a long time, even during Obama time. Now, looking forward though, now we have a president that almost makes a cross-line news every single day, and you just now saying that, well, that's not a big stuff for him to do so, and he will do it anyway. So what are we looking at? And then yesterday I had an interview with a insurance specialist talking about Trumpcare versus Obamacare. And she pointed out, her name is Coco. Coco pointed out right there, saying, at the election, during election, before and right after, he says, his biggest slogan was, I would make the healthcare more affordable. Now is not affordable. Now is not as cheap as before. Now it is about 30% more higher, and in some cases even double and triple to age people. So, and conclusion is that he lied. So now, we're talking about all these issues together with the wall and all change. Remember last time we were here, we were talking about changing. We always make another statement to cover the previous, and then another statement to cover the previous. So where are we heading?
Well,
we the people.
Well, look, I think, to borrow a line from President Trump when he was doing the Apprentice show, I mean, it's a time to either put up or shut up. The president is now in a situation where he actually has to deliver on all the promises. So, for example, if he is not able to build a wall, if insurance rates don't go down for Americans, if tax reform does not bring tax relief or simplification to most Americans, if the situation overseas, continues to deteriorate, or he gets us into another war, obviously he's going to suffer the consequences. This will probably be one of the shortest presidencies that we're going to see. But
Yes.
Again, at the end of the day, we also have to understand that this president has entered office with arguably some of the most controversy, some of the most heated political passion, and some of the most die-hard resistance to his agenda.
And die-hard supporters.
Yeah, so it's a product of the political times we live in, where things are hyper-partisan in a social media kind of environment. So I think, in a lot of ways, the president has to kind of figure out a way to kind of navigate this through in order to get his proposals through Congress legislatively. Ultimately, though, within the next year or two, we're going to have to kind of see what the impact is going to be on average Americans, and they will be the ones who decide whether or not Donald Trump is...
Even midterm.
Yeah, has kept any of his promises. The problem with President Trump is that he was swept into office on a wave of economic populism, with people who were unhappy with the fact that they had never recovered from the mortgage meltdown, that their economic standing did not improve under President Obama. So because of that, there are high levels of expectations as to what President Trump needs to do. If President Trump is not able to meet those expectations, then there's absolutely no sympathy for that electorate, nor is there any kind of loyalty or allegiance to support him beyond his promises. And that really is part of the process, because you have to understand that if you break down the electorate as to how Donald Trump got elected, he was elected almost as an independent, and that puts him in a little bit of a precarious position, because he can't rely reliably on either Democrat base of support or Republican base of support.
Nobody buys his check.
Nobody
buys his check. Yes.
Yeah.
But the constituents buys, because we're the taxpayers. We're the one who hired him, right? Okay. Now, talking about the Trump care, take myself, for example. I'm not a guy just talking. I do my own research. I took my wife's case, for example, to test the water. I did buy an insurance for her, health insurance, by following the Trump pattern, go in the free market. And at that free market, I paid $294 for her. And then I got another plan trying to go into Obamacare, hoping that they will never pass the Senate. Okay, for that, for the same, even better coverage, I pay $146.94. So you're talking about half of the cost. So the word saying that I would make healthcare more affordable for you was obviously a lie.
Well, here's the thing. Obamacare the central point of Obamacare was to create universal coverage by mandating everyone have to have insurance. Then it set up a tax plan to fund it. And then its primary mechanism for providing insurance was a large expansion of Medicaid. So those were the drivers of how Obamacare worked. Now, in Trump care, the major driver how that's going to work is that it allows states to opt out of Obamacare standards and allow insurers to set different rates and set different plans. Now, in states like California, which are a deeply Democratic state, they're not going to opt out of Obamacare. So in California, you're not going to see very much change. But in other states like Texas, for example, they may opt out, in which case you may see plans that are offered that are cheaper but have less coverage. Or if you have pre-existing conditions, you might see your premiums go up. If you're relatively young and healthy, your premiums might drop drastically. So that is how that mechanism is going to work. The problem is that both mechanisms in Obamacare and Trump care are both flawed because neither one of them deals with cost containment. And that's the primary problem in America, because America's healthcare system is a for-profit system. So until you address all of the providers that enter that profit stream, doctors, providers, hospitals,
manufacturers,
drug companies, and so forth, that you really aren't going to shrink the cost curve. And that really is the problem, because Obamacare and Trump care both don't shrink the cost curve. And so in the case of the Republicans, they passed through the House a Trump care proposal, it's going to go to the Senate, I almost guarantee you it will not survive the Senate in its present form. It's going to have to be substantially modified.
In other words, it will not pass.
Not in its present form, no. It will have to be changed fairly substantially. And then within that case, if the Senate...
I take that prediction.
Well, if the Senate passes its bill there, then they will have to reconcile, and then they'll decide.
The reason being, neither of the two cares points to the middle part.
Well, there's no, again, there's no
which
cost
is the,
containment.
Cost containment, and which refers to the links of all the interest group.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Americans want good health insurance and good service at a lower price. Fundamentally, that's a very difficult thing to do.
It is, but you get to the very big point, a very important point, the head of the nail though. If you do not shrink the cost of the care though, whoever care, Obamacare, Trump care, whoever care, maybe there's a third party care. So you're not talking about shrinking, not talking about affordability.
Yeah. Well, again, you know, it depends who is going to pay for that cost and who's going to pay for the reduction in services to mitigate that cost. Frankly, I don't have an answer for that because it's
I know you don't, but the prediction for not passing the Senate House was satisfaction enough.
Well, in its present form, this particular Republican proposal will not pass the Senate.
Will not, right? And they say they have 52 already. That's a majority, and that allows them a room for losing one vote to get a majority.
Yeah, but again, you know, I think you will find that the House proposal in its present form is not going to get 50+1. So.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good. My dear audience, we have more and more questions than we could cover. And we thank you very much for watching. And I believe that your questions are all answered for the past 1 week, right? In a condensed way. The credit goes to Honorable Mr. James Lee, the founder and CEO of Lee Strategy, former spokesman for California, Governor Pete Wilson, and the former presidential advisor for George W. Bush, the father and the son. All right. So, sir, thank you very much.
Always good.
And I know that for 2 weeks in a row, or twice for 2 weeks, is quite a push for you. But, you know, I'm very sorry.
Always happy.
And I apologize on behalf of Donald Trump.
It's fine.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right, good.
All right, bye now.